If only men were as free as the birds. To be able to fly. To fly and be free.
A bird is able to fly because of the air which supports it.
Perhaps his state of mind gave Leonardo his first ideas about flight.
There are precise mathematical forces at work which allow a bird to fly. The wing exerts as much pressure against the air as the air exerts against the wing.
Theoretically, then, man should be able to reproduce the conditions which enable birds to fly. Leonardo would work toward that end. But meanwhile, he would develop another means to be free of the envy and jealousy and the prying eyes of men. He used a simple technique, yet ingenious. He wrote backwards from right to left, so the only way his notes could be read was in a mirror. He wanted to hide his thoughts, his ideas. He wanted to hide anything that might reveal his real personality and the private man. He kept his notes secret in this way, always. But new forces were beginning to take hold. Forces which were to shape the pattern of the whole future for Leonardo. The fact is, from this point on, the brilliant art of Leonardo became rare. And the time spent in study and other areas of interest increased. Oh, he hadn't finished yet. There were still paintings to be done. Enough of them. They took much longer. Years, some of them. There were others he never finished. He was constantly moving on from one project to another, as though, by showing a completed work, he might also be showing the world some imperfection which ought to remain hidden. So there were the two major drives in Leonardo. He coveted both. They were basic to his life, solitude and perfection. Although he was never again prolific in his painting, the works he did complete stand alone. They're monumental. The works of genius. In 1481, Leonardo was commissioned to paint an Adoration of the Magi for the monastery of San Donato at Scopeto. He worked on it for over a year which included time out for other studies, and several changes of mind about the composition of the painting. A copy of his contract still exists. Drafted in a quibbling style by his father, Ser Piero, it contains clauses which give definite advantages to Leonardo. Perhaps the contract, in addition to the time wasted, was the cause of the monk's growing impatience.
Leonardo, my son, you've been painting this Adoration for months now, but I see very little progress.
There is progress, but I'm striving for perfection.
Perfection is not of this world. Show a little humility.
I do. My studies are making me more humble every day.
I gave you 4 lire and 6 soldi in June. Am I correct?
Correct.
And I gave you 20 florins in July. Am I right?
Yes.
Besides that, you were given flour and wine. You are forcing us to find someone else. Perhaps less talented, but at least the painting will be finished.
Sometimes, when he was dissatisfied or under great stress in his work, he would go back to the workshop where it had all begun. There he could hear the harsh, decisive voice of his old maestro, Andrea del Verrocchio, and watch others learning their craft.
Modeling in clay already.
Welcome back, Maestro Leonardo.
Most of his old companions were no longer there, of course. Their places had long been taken by young apprentices, who considered him old. All but one.
Leonardo, it's been a long time since we've seen you. Something's bothering you. What's wrong?
Oh, discontent.
Discontent? With your work?
With myself.
Who are they? Who? Oh, they're from Venice. I heard them talking about a commission for an equestrian statue, and they've got a lot to spend, I guess.
We use that forge for the smaller work. Now, this is the area where the apprentices learn to paint and model with clay. Most of them stay about 5 or 6 years, except for my friend Lorenzo. He spent quite a while here with me. This one used to work here. He's too good for me now. Well, anyway, there's more than enough room, as you can see. This is where we'll model the clay. There's more room there. The casting, of course, will have to be done in Venice.
You'll need much more room than this.
It has to be bigger than the one by Donatello.
Bigger by half.
By more than half.
10 cubits high.
Perhaps 12, in fact.
We'll model out here.
Where?
Here, the courtyard.
Ah, I see. I think it will suffice. Yes. There'll be room enough here for our purposes, I believe. Oh, but one moment. What if it rains?
You'd simply get wet.
The Maestro's had to deal with this before. He builds a covering for the courtyard.
I see you use a covering to protect the model. That'll be fine, I'm sure.
As far as advance payment is
We'll
concerned,
return and discuss that with you tomorrow. You understand that our city requires a statue which will be worthy of placement in the...
oh, a masterpiece.
Yes, well, it must be worthy of Venice, which will pay you commensurately and even...
It's worked for all of us for over a year. And this commission is more important than anything we've done. It will be our Maestro's greatest piece of work. And those Venetians pay very well.
Who are those men?
Well, they're very rich visitors from Venice, bringing us money, Matteo. More than we've ever seen.
Back to work. No more work today. We'll work tomorrow and celebrate today. Giovanni, go out and buy cheese, salami, and bread. Go on, hurry. You too. And wine. Don't forget wine. Get some tables and benches. Clear this space and put them here. Lorenzo, move this
Yes,
up.
Maestro.
Somebody move that clay back there before it falls. Get those paints off the table. Careful, don't break anything or I'll send you all back to work.
Careful. Careful. Be careful with everything. Move that way.
Here comes the food.
No wine? You're about to take a bath.
Leonardo! What are you doing there? Sit down.
Sit down. If it wasn't for you, we'd have nothing to celebrate. Did you hear how he took care of them for us?
Oh, it's got to be at least 12 cubits high.
No, taller than that, much taller.
Is the courtyard big enough, do you think? What's going to happen if it rains?
It'll probably get all wet.
You can make fun of them, but not their money. After I get that signed commission tomorrow.
Rain money!
As long as the statue doesn't get wet.
It was strangely coincident that Maestro Verrocchio had been commissioned to do an equestrian statue at this time. Leonardo himself had been sketching horses for months, planning to include them as part of the background in his Adoration of the Magi. But, unlike Verrocchio, he was not content to simply capture their shape and movement. He had to know why and how they moved. Why did they rear up on their haunches? What made their nostrils flare? There had to be a reason for each muscle movement. It was all part of his fascination with anatomy and his endless probing into the nature of the world which surrounded him. He sketched them for hours at a time, endlessly recording every movement, every expression, capturing in detail the workings of each set of muscles. Dozens of his drawings have come down to us, fortunately. And together, they make an almost definitive study of the anatomy of the horse. Meanwhile, his painting for the monks of San Donato showed practically no progress.
Good morning to you, Maestro.
Good morning.
You're not finished for the day.
I am.
May I look?
Of course.
Their patience at an end, the monks terminated Leonardo's contract. The Adoration of the Magi was finished by Filippino Lippi.
Hey, don't let those ropes up against it. Don't carry the ladder that way. It's liable to fall. Give them a hand, you two. Hey, you. You, watch where you're walking. It's not made of bronze yet.
While Leonardo carried out his anatomical studies of horses, Verrocchio, with far less preparation, had finished the model for the commissioned statue. Done in gesso, a kind of plaster, it was being dismantled for shipment to Venice, where it would be cast in bronze.
I'll be right there. The other carriage is inside.
Careful.
Ready?
Hold the guide rope.
Come and have a close look. Come on.
A little bit more.
Easy.
It's beautiful. It really is. It's all being created piece by piece. First, we're taking it to Piacenza by wagon. After we get there, we're transferring the crates onto barges. Sail up the Po the rest of the way to Venice. You should have seen the crowds around here last week. I think half of Florence came to see the horse, and they all trooped through the workshop. Pity you didn't see it.
Oh, I did see it, Lorenzo.
When?
Early last week. I came into the courtyard. I didn't see you. You were evidently busy in back talking with the maestro. You going to Venice?
Yes. The maestro wants me to help him with the casting. It's going to be a big job.
You're all deserting me one by one. You, Perugino.
Perugino and Botticelli are already in Rome. They're working on the Sistine Chapel. Can't you move any faster packing those crates?
Easy. Easy. Guide it down.
Bring some of that wood over here. Hey, Giovanni. You came here, you didn't know your end up in the coffin, did you?
The water which flows in the river is the first to go and the last to arrive. It is like a moment in our lives.
Time passes. It cannot be stopped for an instant. Minute by minute, today becomes yesterday. Leonardo had passed 30 now. This particular period of his life in Florence is somewhat mysterious. The fact is, almost nothing is known of his whereabouts for close to 3 years. There is some evidence that he traveled. Others say those 3 lost years were spent in prison. This theory is largely supported by a series of sketches which he titled How to Escape from Prison, and some rather enigmatic words in a notebook. You cast me into prison. The years in Florence were years of intense study, that we do know. As a painter, his talent was fully established, but his productivity was sadly deficient. This period was preparatory. He began designs for work he was never to finish. There were years forever gone, years which should have produced so much. Rather than an entire body of work, he completed only the Annunciation, now in the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, and possibly 2 Madonnas which hang in the Hermitage at Leningrad. There may have been other works which have since been lost, of course. But still, it is sad to think that 10 years in Florence produced so little. Perhaps he did travel, as some would have it, or did go to prison, as others speculate. Those theories might account for much. 2 other major works were begun in Florence. The Adoration of the Magi for the monks, and this one, a monochromatic study of St. Jerome, which now hangs in the Vatican, neither of which was ever finished. Why? The reasons for his actions are pure conjecture. We'll never know what they were. But we go on delving anyway, in hopes that someday, by accident perhaps, we'll find the key to Leonardo. What he was thinking, what drove him. So much of the man has been shrouded in legend that the real Leonardo is difficult to find. It's as though a veil separated us. We can see outlines and shapes behind it, but not the details. And that makes him even more tantalizing. perhaps he felt stifled by Florence. This highly civilized but strangely provincial city may have begun to pall after 10 years. Perhaps the gossip and pettiness of which he had been the subject became unbearable, who knows? The anonymous accusation which had brought him to trial was surely still on his mind. Perhaps he was just restless. These and other reasons all contributed to his decision to leave Florence. He would find another city in which to work, one that might satisfy his eternal discontent. He chose Milan. Since its wealth was relatively new, its court was not as refined as that of Florence, but it was equally magnificent, and the city itself was industrious and alive. And it was common knowledge that Lodovico the Moor was seeking talent which would add luster to his court. Without warning, he left. His notes do not include his reasons for leaving, but do include a detailed account of his luggage. Vasari suggests that Leonardo was sent to Milan to play in the presence of the Duke, who greatly enjoyed the sound of the lyre. An interesting speculation, but very unlikely. The year was 1482. In fact, we were able to pinpoint his departure because of a letter he sent earlier that spring. He wrote Lodovico the Moor, offering his personal services as a writer, as an architect, as a sculptor, certainly not as a musician. When he left, he took 2 people along. Not friends exactly, but rather professional acquaintances. One was Atalante Miglioretti, a musician. Perhaps it was his presence on the journey that formed the basis for Vasari's theory. Leonardo's other companion was Tommaso Massini da Barottola, whom he called Zoroastro in his notes. A skilled workman, Zoroastro in the coming years would play a large role. He would build the mechanical models Leonardo designed, among them the flying machines. It was the spring of the year. A new beginning. Florence, the past, was behind him. Milan, the future, was waiting. What would it hold?